Hi everyone, welcome back to the C++ tutorial series on creating plugins for Cinema 4D. My name is Kent Barber, and let's just jump back into where we were before. We created an object in not the last tutorial, but the one before that, and it was called first object, and all it did was it put a cube directly in your scene. And what we want to do now is change that to remove the default cube and just create a polygon object ourselves and return that instead. So we jump back into the code here. And this is what we've got right here. But what we want to do instead of this is we want to create a polygon object. So we're going to go Polygon Object, and let's call it ppoly equals Polygon Object, Polygon Object, alloc. And this takes two arguments. One is the point count and the other is the polygon count. So we want to make a cube here. So a cube's going to have 8 points, one for each corner of the cube, and it's going to have 6 faces. But these faces are actually going to be made up of triangles. Now, so we could actually decide to do 12 faces there if we wanted to do triangles, but Cinema 4D has quads built into it, so we can actually say 6 if you're familiar with any kind of geometry. So we're going to have 6 square faces, or they're called quads. Now this alloc method is very similar to one we made before ourselves for this object itself. I just want to kind of show that there. And this is the same sort of thing, right? A static polygon object alloc. So it's a method that you can call directly on the polygon object, and it's going to actually return a copy of itself. But in this case, it's going to include memory, and it's going to be set up to have 8 points and 6 vertices, 6 polygon faces, 6 quads. Now to get that information, what we want to do is we want to go vector star points, p points equals p poly get points, and we want to be able to write to these, so get point w. And we want to get the polygon as well. So C polygon, star P polys. Now I probably shouldn't call it polys because you might get it confused with that. So I might rename that as polyobj, just so that we don't get confused there while looking at it. And we want that to be polyobj get polygons, and we want to get the W version as well, W for write. And so we want to set these points up, so I'm just going to do that now, and we can do that by iterating over all the points. So p points, and I need to talk about arrays now. So what this returns is it returns a pointer to a vector. Now what this pointer that's actually returned is actually an array of vectors, and there's going to be 8 of them. And what an array is, it's just a storage, and you can access them by these brackets here. So we've got the first one in this array is going to be 0, and then we're going to have 1, and then 2, and then 3, all the way up to actually 7. And you may be wondering why 7 and not 8. Well, that's because we're starting at the number 0. So we count from 0. So we go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's a total of 8. And this here is, it's memory that's stored within the polygon object. So if I just right click and go to declaration, so a writable points array. So just follow through. If it seems confusing, don't worry about it. Just follow through and you'll get there. So we want to make set this. So the very first entry in this array of 8 values, we want that to be one corner of the cube. So we're going to say -1, -1, -1. And that's going to be a location, if you know x and y coordinates, x going across that way, y going up, and z coming towards you. And we're going to do this for each point. So I'm going to put all those in there, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and one more, 7. So now we want to set the values for all of these. I'm just going to do that, and then I'll start the video again. Actually, I might as well just do this and record this as well. So we're just going to make all different corners of the cube there. So I'm going to have -1, -1, 1, -1, 1, 1, -1, and then -1, 1, -1. And then I want to actually, I'm just going to copy these and paste them and change that back to 4, 4, 5, 6, 7. And on these ones, I can just change those to a 1. So if you look at these are all the 4 corners of a cube in X, Y, and Z coordinates. And now we want to create the polygons. So the polygons are the sides of each of the cube, each of the faces, and these are quads, and a quad contains 4 points. And in here, this returns a polygon array of C polygons. And we're going to do something similar. Here we're going to go P polys equals C polygon. And let's just look at the constructor here. You can take in 3 for a 3 indexes for a triangle, or you can take in 4 indices for a quad. And you can also a couple other things there. And the index that we want to pass in is going to actually be looking into this array here. So when I type numbers in here, if I go 0, I'm actually saying this one here. So we want to go from this one to this one to this one and then to that one. And that will be our first quad. So I'm going to go 0, 1, 2, 3. And that's actually our very first quad. Now I haven't put a open bracket, close bracket, 0 in there, so the very first quad is going to be a 0, 1, 2, 3. And now I'm just going to do the opposite quad for that, which is going to be 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's on the other side of the face and the Z coordinate. 4, 5, 6, 7. And we'll make that 1. And then I'm going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I have to kind of think about this a bit more. I will just actually pause it now because you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm going to be picking these coordinates, these indices here, and I'm going to be using them as each of the corners of the cube. So I'll just pause it and then we'll continue. Okay, so I'll put the numbers in there now, and I just drew this on a piece of paper just to try and figure this out, and hopefully I've got the numbers right. But you can see here now we have 6 of these, so that is the polygons. So those are the polygons that are set for our object. And once we have set these values, we just need to tell this Polygon object to update itself, so it knows to relook at its data and that you've changed everything. So you go Polygon Object message update. It just tells it to re-update itself. And now I don't need to pass back this cube, I can pass back this Polygon object. So let's just see if this works. Just compiling it and running it. Cinema 4D. And now let's see what happens when I click this button. Oh, nothing happened. Let's see if we get any errors from our console. No errors in there. So I've obviously done something wrong. So let's just jump back over to the code there and have a little look. But everything's looking good there, so I'm just going to jump back into Cinema 4D, and I realize what the issue is now. Let's just zoom in here. I've made my cube very, very small. So all we need to do is multiply this to make it a little bit larger in Cinema 4D. So let's just close that down. So instead of -1, I actually want this to be -100. So I'm just going to go through and change those now. Actually, instead of going through and changing those one by one, I'm just going to write a little for loop to do that for me here. For int I equals 0, I is less than 8, I plus plus, because I don't think we've covered for loops yet. And what this is doing is it's going to say for when you set a value, your initial value, I'm going to call this an integer, and it's going to be have a value of I. and we're going to start at the number 0. And then as it goes through this and calls whatever code is in here, when it gets back up to the top, get back to the end, it goes back to the top, and it increments this value once. So I++ is shorthand for going I equals I plus 1, which is the same as we saw before, it's going I plus equals 1. But you can just go I++, and that will increase this value by 1 every time it goes through this for loop. So it's going to go through 8 times, starting at 0. It's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8. And as soon as I is equal to 8, or greater than 8, it's going to finish, it's going to break out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go p points I. So now I'm using I as the value to pass in to index this array here. And we're going to tell it to go equals. Now I could say that times 100. And what that's going to do is that's going to say whatever the values in here, inside this vector, what I want it to do is multiply every one of these by 100. And this is just shorthand. So you could also go and you could say, if you wanted to, you could say dot x equals dot x times 100, and then you could do the similar thing for y and z. You go y and z, because these vectors have x, y, and z coordinates here, and you can access them by typing x, y, and z. But if you just want to change all of them, x, y, and z, you can do this shorthand and go times 100. And in fact, you don't even need to put this at the front, because a shorthand for doing times something by itself is just doing that times equals. I'm just going to put 0.0 in there to make that a float as well. And what that will do now is that we'll go through and change all these points from 1, 1, 1 to 100, 100, 100. And I'll just put a breakpoint in there just to show you that as well. Press F5. I'm just going to run that. And I'm going to click my button here. Comes in here. And so we can inspect these points as well. So we can see that one there. I can expand it. But it will just show the x, y, and z components of that vector. And if I just hover over there, you're going to see the first one. Actually, let's grab this and go into our watch. So I'm going to copy this text, including the I and the open bracket, close bracket, and paste it in here. And this will let me watch whatever value that is. Interesting that that's, anyway. Oh, it's not defined yet because we're not in the for loop. So if I now step into that for loop, we can see now I is going to have a value of 0. I can put that down here as well. And the p points at I is currently -1, -1, -1. If I was to step over that, it's now going to be -100, -100, -100. And if I keep stepping through, I'm pressing F10 on the keyboard, or you can press this button up here to step over. And it's going to increase the value to 1, and now it's going to be doing the next one in the array, and it sets that to 100, -100, -100, which is 100 times this one. And we can just keep stepping through there. 2, 3, 4, 7. And you can see after 7, it broke out. And now we're down to here, and we're setting the polygons. So that's a for loop, and that enables you to iterate over arrays or anything that has anything that requires you to, go over a certain range. And you can have that started at a negative, and you can go to a negative number as well. And you can also minus, so that could be a higher number, this could be a lower number. You could swap that around to be a greater than. So it's a bit safer than using a while loop. While loop may go forever unless you break out, but for loop, you can iterate over things as you want and as you want to. So let's just continue now. Now I've made some changes to my code, so I'm just gonna actually stop that and rebuild that again. When you edit the file, Cinema 4D will detect that, Visual Studio will detect that you've made some changes. When you try to continue, it will just tell you, and you may need to restart. So anyway, that loop there has changed it, so we've set all these values to 100. So now the bounds of our cube is going to be going from minus 100 to positive 100, which gives it a size of effectively 200, which is 2 of these squares. So it should be the same as a regular cube in the screen, in the scene there. So there's our cube, and if I was to click the cube button, you'll see it's pretty much overlapping exactly the same location. Well, it is the same location. So I think that's a pretty good point to leave this at the moment. So if you want to experiment, you can go into the code and you can create your own objects if you want to, by hand. If you want to experiment creating your own kind of polygon objects there. Now, because this is a polygon object, you can also add a Phong tag to it to change the... we won't worry about that right now. But it is a polygon object, so if I was to make it editable by clicking this button, it will turn into an actual polygon object there. And now if I was to move one of the vertices, let's grab this one and let's move it around. The vertices are connected because we're sharing points between those faces. So all these will be sharing their actual points. Because what we could have done is, if we really wanted to, we could have come in here and we could have made a set of points for each individual face. So we could have had these 6 faces with 4 points each. So you could have had 24 points. And then if we had turned it into an editable object and moved the vertice, it would actually disconnect from itself. But because we're sharing the points between these polygons, when you move it around, that's what happens. And now you can imagine all the other objects like spheres and toruses and all those, they're just computationally creating these points as they go. So you can imagine writing a function that comes up with a number here for the number of points and polygons, and then using for loops, it goes through and it sets all the data using some mathematical expressions. And that's actually exactly what happens in some of the examples in this SDK. So I'm just going to stop Cinema 4D there. Let's just see if we can find some. So a good way to find that is to, let's just try searching for this, because wherever this is in the code, that's, you know, where someone is creating a polygon object. And you can see a few here. You got a lofted mesh. This is probably quite a complicated one. You can see here it's taking some steps and a few other things for it, but there down here it's using that to calculate the number of vertices, number of polygons, creating that there, and then it's got a method down here which fills the vertex positions, resizes certain things, and then fills in polygon data. So I'm going to right click and go to this one actually, fill polygon object data, and this seems to be some helper function, and again just mathematical expressions, a couple of for loops there, iterating over 2 values, and as part of that it's running a bunch of maths down here and to figure out what polygon should actually be set. So if you're mathematically inclined, feel free to dive in to try and create some shapes. Alright, that's where I'll leave it today, and we'll pick it up tomorrow, and I'll look at resource objects, resource files, to try and create some UI for your object. We'll get to that tomorrow. Okay, cheers, thanks.